What's going on, you 3D modeling beasts? This is JL Musey, and on the other side of the lens, I have my man, Phil Rosado from Method Studios. And Phil is a layout supervisor and a lead at Method Studios. And he's responsible for working on big blockbusters like Black Panther, Thor Ragnarok, and Aquaman. So I really want to just welcome you to the show. And I'm excited to hear your insights about VFX life and life in the film industry, and really just pick your brain.
Yeah, JL, thanks for having me, man. Appreciate it.
Let's go ahead and just get you started. And I want to just have you introduce yourself and let people know a little bit about you and really what you do at Method Studios.
I've been working in the industry just about 13 years now. I've been at Method for just about 7 of those years. I wear a lot of different hats. I'm kind of a generalist, but my role at the studio is a lead layout artist. Depending on the show, I may supervise a show, going on set, working layout. Sometimes I'm doing some match moving, depending, maybe some animation, some modeling. All depends on what they're looking for from me, but my main role at the studio is layout. So
you definitely wear a lot of hats. So let's take it back a little bit before you landed that gig at Method. And how did you actually start developing an interest within films and VFX? What was your childhood like? And maybe you could share one of those iconic films or even scenes that maybe, all as kids, sometimes we step back and be like, man, that scene was awesome. And I really want to work on a movie of that caliber someday. So maybe we could step back in time and we could kind of get in the head of young Phil. And, what was your process and how you gravitated towards films in the first place?
Yeah, so let's see. I have always been an artist, I guess, in a sense. My father, he's an oil painter. He does a lot of traditional art and oil paintings. And I learned to draw from my dad. I'd always be around him. And, I picked up the pencil and he'd teach me a little bit. And then I'd just go and do my thing. My dad was more drawing like nature, environments and all that stuff. And I did the cartoony side. I was always drawing cartoons. And, as a little kid, I'd draw like Ninja Turtles and stuff in school. And I'd have kids come up to me and want to buy my art because they want some of my stuff. And I remember going home one day, I had like a bunch of drawings that I did. And I came home with like $5 and my dad's like, "Where'd you get that?" And I told him, I was like, I sold some of my work.
You were a hustler back then.
Yeah, man. So my dad was like, he was laughing. He's like, "My son's beating me selling artwork before I'm selling artwork." And, but I've always drawn. After that, I got into a little bit of digital design. Right before 2005, I started up I was at Tulane, and I was getting a little bit more into the digital design work. I was a draftsman for Norco, actually, during that time, and Hurricane Katrina came. And my career kind of ended for my drafting work that I was doing at the refinery at Shell for Norco. So, my wife was, where are we going to go? We're going to go, east or west? What do you want to do? So, we had just come back from a vacation and, we saw a school while we were in Florida, Full Sail. And, when I was mentioning to her, well, we can always go to Houston, or I can go work out in the rigs down, in the Gulf, because I'm from Louisiana. And she's like, "Well, what about this school? You went and saw it, and you've always wanted to do this kind of stuff." And I had to think about it for a minute, because I was like, that was just a dream. I never thought I'd be doing something like that. I thought it was just, it was just there. And she's like, this is your chance to change what you're doing and do what you've always wanted to do. So, I ended up going in that direction and went to Full Sail and, took up computer animation while I was there. And pretty much from that point, I just was buckled down. My wife was like, "Don't fail, just go straight through. When you're done, we're going to continue our lives." And that's what I did, man. So, I was at school, did my thing, graduated back in 2007, and picked up a small little gig at a studio named Kashot in Houston. Just a small studio. They kind of went out of business, but it was just something to get my feet wet. just because, I was trying to look for something. One thing led to another. I was at a friend's party, a birthday party, and I came across, a gentleman that was there, and he saw one of my demo reel that I had made, and that actually landed me my first gig out in LA, working at Frantic Films on Avatar. So like my first film was, working on that show, and then that show kind of, brought me into working into Vancouver and all these other films that I've been working on since.
No, that's great, and I really like the fact that you illustrated the fact that you had to kind of do kind of the stepping stone approach to smaller studios, and ultimately you had a breakthrough, got you an Avatar, and that led to other bigger opportunities. Because we definitely see students that get discouraged, and they kind of have this ambition or hopes that they're going to hit their home run right out of either if they're self-taught, they're just going to put their reel up and get a kind of a dream job, or if they graduate, their first job is going to be kind of that dream job scenario. And a lot of times it's a little bit of a grind, a little bit of transition, and kind of these stepping stone studios that lead you to these ultimate dream roles. So I'm kind of glad you were able to touch upon that. So what is your life like as a lead, as a VFX artist within the industry? What time do you usually go into work? What time do you usually leave? If you could talk a little bit about maybe crunch. I know things might get hectic, so can you just talk a little bit about daily life within your studio?
Sure. So let's see. I start my day off bringing my kids to school. I got 3 kids, so right off the bat, I got my daddy duties too. So I get my kids to school. I'm in work right around 9:30 in the morning. Depending on the day, depending on the work, it's pretty much I'm there from 9:30 till 6 o'clock, and then head home. In the studio during the day, depending on what tasks I'm given, or what's on my plate, I'm pretty much setting up environments and building, things that don't exist. We talk to, I'm in client calls and everything, and I'm, on whatever show it is. They ask a bunch of questions. What can we do? How can we make this look like this? And while everybody's talking, I'm like in my head, I'm listening to what they're really going for. And by the time they're already finished asking a question or talking about whatever it is they're talking about, I've already got a picture in my head of how I'm going to lay things out and how I'm doing stuff. So then I'll start explaining, like we can do something if it's brought to my attention, like, hey, directly to me in a client call, like, what should we do? What can we do? I may raise my voice, or I may keep my voice until the meetings are done, let my production know, like, here's my idea for it. I'll pitch them the idea. They'll say, okay, let's see an iteration, and I'll go and start setting it up. If I'm working with a team and I'm supervising on that show, I'll delegate to the different artists that are working with me, what I need them to do while I'm working on a different piece of it. And we put it all together and push it through to, until it's final.
Cool. Now that sounds awesome. That sounds like a lot of responsibility, and really, like you do, like you said earlier, you do wear a lot of hats. So you send me your demo reel, and we're going to go ahead and take a look at that. And maybe we can visually kind of give the audience a little bit of a breakdown and exactly what you did. Some of these things that we talk about can be hard to visualize just with words, and we work in visual storytelling, right? And that's kind of what you do in essence. So we're going to go ahead and just throw up your demo reel, and then I'll ask you some questions, and maybe you can give me some breakdowns on these shots. So we're looking at Phil's demo reel here, and this shot right here is of Aquaman. So what did you exactly do? And just give us a breakdown of the shot and what's going on here.
This shot in particular, at the beginning of my reel, I was just sitting in dailies one day, and I kind of overheard our VFX supervisor actually talking about this shot and how they needed a time lapse, and was looking to have animation do a bunch of stuff on it. Took it upon myself and went back when after my dailies were approved. And got back to my desk, and I just started fiddling with it, and I just started taking all the pieces that were broken that I had already laid out everywhere, and I kind of reassembled everything and put it all back together, and kind of really steppy animation, really fast, like going from the bottom and having it move back up into the position that it should be in. And then I added some ground effects where I had the ground kind of moving up and down, just like, the sand is kind of moving, from just sediment like kind of settling in different areas. And that afternoon, I had like a version 1 of it and passed it back, through dailies. And all of a sudden, the VFX soup saw it and was like, "Where did this come from? What is this? This played again?" And it was like, "This is great. This is a great first iteration. Who did this?" And it was like, "This came from layout." So I had a bunch of different iterations of this shot. I did the camera moves and everything on this as well, because the camera that was running on set was moving in the opposite direction. So I had to do some camera projections onto the match move that I had set up in the scene.
No, that's amazing. And I know you mentioned match move. So can you maybe describe or explain what that is exactly for maybe some of the subscribers that are not sure of that technique or what that entails?
Yeah, sure. So depending on the way you look at match move, it could be integration. Some people call it integration, but it's camera work. So we have our trackers who track the environment or do integration on a bunch of these shots. The characters that are within those camera shots, they're actually moving around on set, and we have to recreate those movements with our digi-doubles that we have so that we can either project or use them as a jump off point for added effects. So as you can see, like right here, like Jason Momoa, this was him on set, and we had a match move, 100% match move of Jason, so that we can obviously do his hair that was on there. But then for when this camera spins around, when he's going to fight the Karathan, it turns into the digi-double. So, it's things like that where we 100% match the movement of a character with an approved, match move camera, and, send these characters doing all kinds of stuff that we can't physically do, right?
So for VFX shots like this, is it standard to have just digital doubles pretty much for most of the heroes? Because I'm assuming at most points, they will be digitally duplicated to do, some more elaborate effect shots, right?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, the characters can only do so much in real life. We're limited to what we can do. So, when there's something that's an explosion or a bunch of these superhero movies where they're doing something that's physically not possible, we use these digi-doubles to line up their positions, and we have like a cut-in frame where we just flip over to the digi-double, and you almost can never tell where these transitions happen.
All right, so in this part, we're looking at this Deadpool scene where he's just crashing through, and he's pretty much covering this, city landscape. So can you talk a little bit about, this shot and what went behind it, and actually what was your role in creating the shot?
Sure. So for this, this one was technically a lot of pretty much all CG. I took and laid out this environment from our assets that we had. I actually was out on set for this. So I did a lot of photogrammetry for the buildings for downtown Vancouver, so that we can take and project onto a lot of our buildings. This asset that I have set up here, the way I have it set up was for one of the streets where he's jumping to fight a bunch of guys. And I had to take and model this market that was down on the street. So really quick, I took and modeled a bunch of these tents and a bunch of the market stuff so that we can take and project our textures, and the matte painters can add textures and lighting and everything down there to fill in the scene for what it was.
Nah, that's amazing. This is an amazing shot. So I have two follow-up questions. Since all these elements are pretty far away, what was the level of detail on maybe some of those tents? Were they, almost like a block out, or did you go fully, holding edges, subdivisions, and UVs and high quality textures?
Yeah. So the buildings are pretty much high, mid to high res buildings that we have set up there, and then the texture department, took and textured it. For the portion that I did, that was from assets. For the portion that I did made on the street, I had a bunch of, actually, I kind of researched online a bunch of different markets that I saw in Chinatown, and I started recreating some of these tents and just blocking it out based off of, images that I saw, or when I actually go down to Chinatown when I'm down in downtown Vancouver. And, just looking at the way it's set up, and I kind of set it up kind of, somewhat the same way. I take and throw like a base, drop my UVs down, make sure everything's kosher, and then I pass that back to assets so they can assetize it, and then go from there and pass it off to textures artists who will take and start texturing it, and then it goes on from there. So sometimes, my role is not mainly to model, but I do know how to do, that work. So when something like that comes to me, I can quickly take and start blocking things out so that the asset department will have something to work off of, and then they elaborate more on that from there. So for this, I took and pretty much modeled out most of the tents that you see here, and they may have added a bunch of the higher detailed pieces.
Can you tell some of the subscribers at home what the process of photogrammetry is and what that entails?
Sure. So when I go out on set, I have a bunch of different roles, and one of them is actually taking on-set photos. So I have a pretty good representation of what was in the environment at that time. Depending on if it's a night shot, if it's a day shot, we'll set up our different times to go out. If it's something that's not inside or indoors on a set, if it's outside, they may choose a time of day that'll represent what's actually there so that we can get some good representation. But for photogrammetry, technically, I have my camera and I'm taking multiple pictures in an array around like a 360 around a certain area, depending on what I'm taking pictures of. If it's a building, depending on where I'm at, I'll start from, a 3/4 of that building, and I'll take like a high, a mid, low picture. I'll move, maybe 10, 15 feet and take a low, mid, high picture, move like right to the center of the building, high, mid, low, and I do that all the way to the other 3/4. That gives us a good array of, a good parallax of that building, so you can see it from all sides and all angles. So when these matte painters are painting, they can use these pictures from whatever angle, or if we have a sweeping motion of a camera that goes around the building, which is technically what you're doing it for, they can take and stitch these photos together so that you can have a 3D representation of the textures that would go onto the building that's then modeled for it. A lot of the buildings that were downtown in the upcoming shot when he crashes through this building, I took and recreated in Maya and built out base buildings for the exact dimensions. If there were any kind of detail that was standing out, I would add that to it, but it's a base building. And then they would take and project all these images onto those buildings, and then your camera would move around and you get to see it.
You could do amazing stuff with projections.
Yeah, and then vice versa. Those pictures, if I wasn't doing it, the modelers could then use those pictures to recreate, these buildings in high res so that they actually have all the footage they need, and it goes from there. So there's a bunch of different uses.
Now that's a great breakdown. Final Destination 5, that's what we're looking at. So can you break down some of the models that you did and really just your workflow for creating hard surface vehicles?
Sure. So for this scene, I started on the hero truck, the yellow worker truck, technically photoreal. So we had pictures that were taken on set that came back, and I had to reproduce, that vehicle 100% for what it was. Down, the bolts underneath it, everything, because there's shots from later on that has the camera right up on top of it from underneath. So all the wiring stuff that you would see, it's all there. So I took and modeled this vehicle. My supervisor on this show was Dimitri Vink for the modeling soup on Final Destination 5. And I went through a good amount of iterations on this vehicle to get it to where it needed to be for the show, to be picture perfect, technically, photoreal. And I modeled a lot of the vehicles that are actually on the bridge in the background as well that are falling. There's another vehicle, burgundy car, that I have in there as well. That's another high-res hero model. But yeah, for a lot of that stuff, the rebar on the bridge, I built a brush to take and recreate the rebar that's on this bridge that's breaking apart. But this vehicle right here, I took and match moved it for a vehicle that was on set that's rolling off of the edge of something. And then I continued the animation of that car falling down toward the water. Effects were added to have the glass breaking and everything, but this was another asset that I recreated from photogrammetry on set to recreate this.
For kind of this hero shot on this car, what is some of the process? Is this a scan data of a vehicle you're getting? Are you getting blueprints? Are you getting just images? What's some of the reference, or what do you essentially have to work with? And the second question is the actual like textures. What's kind of the texture sizes? I'm assuming for things like this, you're probably looking at 4, 8K, maybe even bigger. And what is some of the texturing workflow? Is this something where a program like Substance Painter would be used, or are you just sourcing images to create the textures in the package like Photoshop?
Recreating this vehicle here, we had photos that were taking of the car on set. So we had somebody go and take all the profile pictures of this car. That's all I had to work with in Maya. So start from a blank screen and recreate it. It's technically what I had to build this vehicle. It was then taken and placed on top of the car. So when we started match moving, you have your screen kind of 50, 60% where you can kind of see the plate and not, and then you move your asset on top of it to kind of line it up 100% to make sure that it fits actually what was, the actual vehicle that was on set. Once I had that look, technically that's all it was. My model was then taken, I UV'd everything, and that got passed off to the texture department who actually textured it. So at that studio that I was working at Prime Focus at the time, everything was taken. It was more departments. So I was the modeling department, wasn't doing the textures. So that was passed off, to the next department. I believe they used Mari, but yeah, that was my process. Technically, was just going off a photo reference that was taken on set of the actual vehicle and recreating it.
No, that shot turned out amazing, and you can't even tell, even that car is so close to the screen, but it just really looks like a real car. Can you answer or give some insight on some? I know a lot of my subscribers do want to break into the VFX, the film industry, and work on these big titles, these big blockbuster movies. So, what is some advice for somebody that's looking to break in the industry, demo reel wise? What kind of assets should they have? And what do you guys look for at a studio like Method as far as demo reels and applications as a whole?
Mm-hmm. So technically, when you're creating your demo reel, or when you're going to put your demo reel to whatever company, be it Method or any other VFX studio or gaming studio, make sure you're paying attention to what that studio creates. Like, look at their demo reel and see their output, and look at your work and see if it matches what's there. Like, it doesn't have to be close, but in the genre of it, just try to see if you can mimic the work that you're looking at, so that if there's a seat available at a studio and we're looking through reels, and I look through reels sometimes to see what's there, and I'll help push something through to say, hey, I found something, this looks pretty good, and I'll pass it to the department so that they can go and review it and see if it's something they're looking for. But if there's a seat available and we look at a reel and it's like, wow, like this person's got it going on, it looks like he's a good fit or she's a good fit, there it goes. It'll go up, and that person may actually be working later on that week, depending on how busy the studio is.
No, that makes perfect sense. Can you give a little bit of insight, since we're talking specifically about portfolios, and you work in the film industry now? There's kind of, our station is pretty big. So what are your thoughts? Is a video, if I'm trying to get in the industry, say for like Method, and I was applying, would I be better suited creating an actual video as far as a video demo reel, maybe like how you have, or maybe, if like I was a modeler and applying, or pictures or images rendered maybe on a site like our station would work as well?
I guess a bit of both. It all depends on how you want to present yourself. As long as your content is there, and as long as you have the work that you can show off what you're capable of doing, because you're selling yourself, right? It's not really just the art that they're looking at, but you're selling yourself. Like, this is what you're capable of doing. That's mainly, to me, that's what it's all about. My first gig in the industry, it wasn't all about the work that I had, and it's a funny way how I got in. I was a modeler and animator when I came out of college, and my attention to detail in my reel is what got me my first job. And it wasn't even modeling or animating. I started tracking. I started doing stereoscopic tracking, and it was something that was brand new at the time. And, nobody had done it before. So we kind of were pioneering it as we were working on Avatar. While I worked on that show, I did flex my skills and showed that I can model and I can light and animate and did all these other things because, I'm match moving on top of that as well. But, you can put your media anywhere. If you have your own website or if you're using ArtStation, if it's just a still, as long as you're putting your best foot forward and you're showing what you're capable of doing. If it's a model that's on ArtStation and you're showing, your 3/4 and then you show your wireframe, just presenting it the way you present it, the way you show it, you're selling yourself at the end of the day. So as long as it's there and the content's there and it's matching what that studio is looking for, you should be able to have a good chance of getting in.
That's a great answer. So I want to ask you, let's kind of shift a little bit from work. And do you have it's still work, but do you have any personal projects? I know you probably put in a lot of hours and maybe, 3D is the last thing on your mind, but are there any personal art projects that you're currently working on, maybe aside from work at Method?
Yeah, so I used to do a lot of modeling when I got out of work. As of late, just all the work, you try to do something a little bit different. And, I kind of went back into doing 2D art. So I've been drawing a lot, and I have, October's coming up right here in October. So I'll be drawing again for that. But I'm also getting a lot into film. So I'm actually, where I live in Vancouver, actually in British Columbia, I live in Squamish, about 45 minutes to an hour north of downtown Vancouver. And it's beautiful. It's outdoors in the mountains. And I'm actually out with my camera, looking to see about getting a drone and actually getting some drone footage and, doing my own little thing. So technically that's what I've been up to, is just, getting back into 2D work. I hadn't drawn in a long time, and I just got back into it and actually doing some film work. So
that's awesome. And, 2D is kind of the roots, and sometimes it can get abandoned because we kind of switched to, doing 3D. But yeah, I'm kind of the same way. I've been doing 2D stuff again, and we always seem to come back. And I think 2D is important to just keep our skills sharp, but it gives us a break from being in that 3D world all the time, right?
Yeah, it feels good because it's for us, it's like, well, at least for me, it's like instant gratification. Like I'm drawing the lines, I could see it coming, and a model may take like a few days, a week to do, depending on what it is that you're doing. But, you do your art, and, sometimes you'll crank through something that you see in your head within like 30 minutes, an hour. And it's like, you got it on paper and it's like, there it is. Cool. And you move on to your next one or take a break.
Yeah, that's awesome. And, you're still keeping in touch with your roots and the 2D side. So I really appreciate your time, Phil, and, just sharing your deep industry experience with me and really just all my subscribers, and getting them a taste of what VFX, life in the VFX industry truly is and what it truly entails. And before you get out of here, I do make these 3D modeling inspired t-shirts. So I'm going to let you get your pick. I have pretty much 3 designs. It's something I've been playing with just on my spare time. So whichever one you want, I'll go ahead and send it your way. We have this one right here, which is make, move, scale up, flip the script, and it's all just based on the 3D transforms.
Yep.
Then we got on a whole new bevel. And then we also have the So Smooth right here. So which one you want, man? Upgrade that swag, and you could bust in Method and be a whole new man with one of these.
I like the whole new bevel, man.
You do?
I dig it.
People like it. All right. Cool. What color you want to roll with? We got black, navy. I think this charcoal gray brings out your eyes. And we got different gray, and then we got a brown. So
I like the navy, man.
The navy? All right, yeah. My man. All right, what size?
Large.
Large? Cool, yep. Man. So shoot me your address after the interview, and it'll be on your way. Please tell my subscribers where they could actually see some of your work, and maybe even if they want to reach out to you, do you have a website or art station that they can check out?
Yeah, sure. It's my just my name, Philip Rosado.com, and I have a lot of my work on there. I started putting some of my 2D work on there, but yeah, you can reach me on there, and then I have information on there if you want to get in touch with me. So
Awesome. So what I'll do for ease of finding you, I'll drop that in the description down below. Ladies and gentlemen, Phil Rosado, thank you so much for your time,
no
and I
problem,
will
man.
catch you guys next time.